Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, and Guru Fateh to all of you. It's really wonderful to be here. I've been looking forward for a pretty long time to interact with you and talk to you on this webinar, and I'm really very happy and very pleased that I'm here today and talking to you. So what I'm going to do essentially is you would have probably gone through the abstract of my presentation, and as we have given the title, I'm going to be talking in terms of the Sikh cosmos, and I've titled it as the freedom for the social and the self. So the freedom for the social and the self, what a true Sikh or a Sikhi must do or should do, and how he can liberate himself, his family, his community, and the entire social community in and around him, in his country, in his nation, and worldwide. So I guess the time allotted to me is around 40 minutes. I'll try to kind of touch base very briefly on certain areas, whereas certain areas I would try to be a little elaborate. However, if you have any questions, I would definitely be pleased to entertain them at the end of the session. So I have this particular thing has been very dear to me all through, and I myself and the organization that I work for have been working in this direction to adopt many Sikhi principles in our day-to-day life and in our organizational framework. And these are the universal values and understandings and teachings which have been enunciated and reinvented and propagated, given to us in form of the Guru Granth Sahib and the teachings of all the 10 Gurus, and subsequently many of the Khalsas who have fought and battled and who have taken up the teachings of the Gurus to the entire world. So this is what we have been doing at our personal level, at the community level, as well as the organization level. So in this sense, as you would see, my dear friends, my dear Sikhi friends, we are all connected. We are linked with each other through the organic filaments of the Sikhi teachings, of the Guru. So, and basically what is that about? It is about adopting and following those values in your day-to-day life, and letting your life be governed by these values. So in that sense, we are a part of the fraternity, and we are friends, and we are comrades, we are together. And our unity is much more formidable, it is much more strong than the superficial divisions or the differences that divide us, so-called. But the sooner we realize our essential organic unity, these very superficial and ephemeral divisions, though they have been strengthened in the contemporary times and in the modern times through various mechanisms, they wither away, they fizzle out. And from there we, as we see, though thrown away by many currents and many areas of external destruction, we as a lotus still bloom, as has been put up on the panel of the Sikh Institute, the teachings of the Guru. So let me begin with this particular background and very brief background as to what do you mean by the freedom for the social and for the self. The way the Gurus have enunciated their teachings has to be seen in a social and a political and economic context. It can't be taken out of the context. So in and around the 13th, 14th century, I would just like to give in brief a background. There were very fierce and very strong and very determinative influences of the society, in which the sensitive hearts and the sensitive minds of the Guru and the Gurus who were connected with the Almighty, they were connected with the One, they found that the Raj, or the kingdom that is there on the earth in their sphere, is not what is the kingdom of the Almighty. And if that has to be there, then it has to be different in form of the social as well as the self. So the social and the political and the economic context was different, and this was not the context which the Gurus had envisioned. or which the linking with the Almighty had given them to be envisioned. And also the self was not the self that was envisioned by the gurus. So they felt the necessity to change the socio-political and economic context of their times, and also the inner world of the self and the inner middle world of the self, which is interacting with the help of the people around them, whether it's a family or the community. So what do we have over here? We have the self, we have the community, and we have the social. So what was that which the gurus had done, which was drastically different from the times of their times? So here we see that though the Khalsa character came very much later on, but what Guru Nanak had pronounced and enunciated in his teachings, the Khalsa character was totally imbibed with it. So when Guru Gobind Singh gave rise to the Khalsa character or the Khalsa identity, he had in mind, and we know very well, that the character had to be built by many areas of work and many areas of values, in which what was the essentiality? Whatever limited understanding that I have and I have been able to develop while working in the sphere, in the field, and going through the teachings of the gurus, what I feel essentially, and many more will endorse my views and subscribe to my views, is that the socio-political and economic context were not the context which gave rise to equality. They were not the context which gave rise to equality in any of the spheres, either social or economic, and even political. So the Khalsa character was given the duty, and the Khalsa identity was not only an identity, but it was a whole set of responsibilities. To do what? What were the duties? So it was to protect. It was to protect what? It was to protect the thoughts and the propagators. And what was the thought? So the thought was that thought which was imbibed, which was enshrined in the Guru Granth Sahib. And who were the propagators? The propagators were all those followers and the people who really understood and followed the Guru Granth Sahib, not only in their minds, but in true spirit in their lives. So everything which followed from this particular thing is, no, not really. The slide should not be changing because I'm going to be coming to the presentation a little later. I'm just giving the background. And what I have here is the later part of the presentation. So which thoughts, I'm coming to my background again. So everything which followed in the Khalsa character and what the Sikhi essentially had to do was totally different or diametrically different to the existing socio-political and religious context. And in that sense, everything which followed was right from the God. So if the God was different of the Sikhi, if of the dominant religion, if it was a God which had to be mediated through and obtained through a certain revelation, here the God was available to all, or he could communicate with the God with his own devotion. His worship is different. So while he's worshipping, he's not asking for his own benefit or for the benefit of his immediate family, but he is asking for the entire cosmos. The devotee himself is different. He's not a devotee who is impure, and he's not a devotee who is self-centered, but he is a devotee who is all equal, and all the devotees are at equal par. So this is what Guru Nanak told. This is what Arjan Dev enshrined in the Guru Granth Sahib, and all the gurus have enshrined and brought it into their character. And then not only that, their God or their Almighty or their connection with the Almighty also enshrines them or gives them the total liberty to question their God. So Guru Nanak himself, during the time when Babur had his invasion, and he questions God that, are you not able to see the atrocities of the invaders? And how come you are silent? So that kind of a questioning which Guru Nanak Ji could do himself, he has given the responsibility, or rather given the liberty to his own followers to do the same. Not only that, the devotee is equal to the God. That means he is not reaching him through only the higher status of his hierarchical birth, but by his devotion and by his work and by his sensitivities and the sentiments, he's reaching to the God and he's becoming equal to the God. He is also given the duty to the followers in the home. So when he is being with them at home, he is behaving with them in equality. He tells them that with women, it's egalitarian and equality based behavior that is more desirable, and that is what should be followed. And when he goes to the society, when the Khalsa goes to the society, he goes and reaches out to protect them and to let them see the path of the God and path of the Gurus. So this is entirely, totally different from the existing dominant religion against which, or as a juxtaposition to which the Sikh religion had come up. So this is in short. So when we are talking about protection, it is the protecting the thoughts in the Guru Granth Sahib, the teachings, and protecting the followers from the enemies or from the adversaries which are within. So within our own self, within the society, and within the outer world. And it is by, not only by protecting, but it is also by attacking, or rather in the sense countering the thoughts and human agencies who are trying to subvert the very pure and very holy thoughts of the Gurus, of the holy Gurus. Then let me come to this particular dimension of why the thoughts need protection, and who are the ones and what are the forces which do not allow its protection, and why, when we connect to the Guru, what is the kind of a transformation that we are seeking? What is the kind of transformation that we want? In the inner realm, that is the inner transformation, and in the outer realm, that is the outer world transformation. And when we talk about that, if we have been given the responsibility of being a warrior for the inner self and the outer self, then what is the battlefield, or what are the battle lines that we have to draw for ourselves? And are these battle lines in any way discordant with the teachings of the Gurus? Is that what we have to reflect upon ourselves? So then we have to see that it's imperative upon us, it's incumbent upon us to visualize the ideology or the thought process and the practice. So ideology is the thought, and practice is what the ideology governs. And this is very clearly, very purely, and very elaborately enunciated in the Sikh religion, in the Sikh world, in the Sikh thought. So the ideology and the practice, these are the two arenas that I'm going to be reflecting upon. Why do these thoughts need protection? They need protection because, let me give the examples of the way the Gurus themselves led the life. So when we talk about the Gurus, they have been advantaged in many ways, as we are advantaged today, because it was a thought which emanated in the 14th century. They had all the rationalistic thought coming from the time of the Charvakas, the Buddha, and thereafter. And they were Guru Nanak himself, Guru Arjan Dev, and Guru Gobind Singh. All of them were intellectuals. Guru Angad, Guru Amar Das, they were all people who had a very sincere intellectual thought, and all their thoughts had gone into developing a rationalistic thought. So essentially, their counter was against the Brahmanvad as well as the Maulanavad, which included the ritualistic and the inegalitarian practices at those times. And this did not only include the ritualism, but also it included the priestcraft, which we already very fairly know. This is because it is not, they got a revelation, but not only they were primed by the teachings of Guru Nanak Ji, but also because of their independent and the in-depth study that each one of them conducted in the religious and non-religious spheres available until then. And definitely it was the historical necessity that they had to defend themselves from the physical onslaught and to protect their faith, because during that time Punjab had always been at the receiving end, being en route to many because of his geographical position, repeated onslaughts. And the onslaughts were not only in the terms of a physical onslaught, but they were the onslaught on the thought itself. And that is the reason why they have to, kind of come up. And it was very necessary, and we see that it has come up in a very fantastic way. Now, the second very important thing, what the Gurus did to protect the thought and to disseminate the thought, was they were relentless travelers. So this is another character which the Khalsa has to imbibe. And when we organize ourselves, that we have to see that we get it in us. So Guru Nanak Ji himself was a relentless traveler, right from Puri to Sri Lanka and Mecca, and he went up to the Himalayas. So much so that he was adopted as a peer all over. Not only that, he also, when we see Guru Gobind Ji, we see in him the incomparable virtue of, adopting the policy of not only giving the Diksha, but also elevating his own Diksha, the people who have taken Diksha, and elevating himself to such an extent that he didn't mind taking the Diksha from his own people whom he had given the Diksha. So this kind of a very rationalistic and a very liberative and a very revolutionary kind of a ideology, as well as the social practice. I mean, they were not only visionaries who kind of only disseminated the teachings but did not adopt it. They definitely adopted the entire teachings, and that's what makes them the Guru, and that is what the true Khalsa today in India and all over the world has to do. And they were democratic to the depth of their heart, and that is what true Khalsa has to be. Ordaining his disciples and then in turn sitting at their feet to receive the Diksha is something which has never occurred in the entire history of religions. And this is something which is totally elevating, it is liberating, and it is totally revolutionary kind of a step which he has taken, Guru Gobind Ji has taken, and which has been unsurpassed today. Then after that, we have seen that they have all through in their teachings have never ever concentrated on the entire process of enlightenment being a revelation, but they have given us the strength and the arms and ammunition to show and tell that it is a scholarly and well-learned person who is able to seek enlightenment, and that is what again has to be the character. And then he has also, Guru Nanak Ji has also, along with the other Gurus, have shown us, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji himself says that my position is at lowest low, means the person and the Gurus who have not stationed themselves, but being at the highest pedestal, he has placed himself from the bottom. So when a faith or an understanding or an ideology takes shape in this form, in which the highest of the most elevated of the Gurus are able to put themselves to the bottom and be with the lowest of the lowly, that faith, it cannot be, there cannot be any other faith which can surpass this particular faith and this particular ideology. So this is what has happened in their times, and that is how the ideology of equality, of brotherhood, of being having an egalitarian outlook towards women, of having an egalitarian outward and a universal feeling of love and brotherhood to all the people in the society, whichever religion, whichever caste or creed. This has been the essential character of the Sikhi. This is the socio-political context in which it has risen. This is the socio-political and the ideological context which it tried to preserve. This is the context which it tried to resurrect again and again. This is the context in which was onslaughted, which was hampered. So the Sant Sainiks which came up, they had to really embattle themselves with the onslaught which were from the inner world, within their inner world, within the world of their society in form of Maulanavad and Brahmanvad, and the outer world thereon until today, until the contemporary times, when we see so many onslaughts till today. So what are the adversaries trying to attack? This is the essential character of the Khalsa that they are trying to attack. And when we ourselves dilute the character of the Khalsa, you can imagine how much are we going against the teachings of the Gurus and against the teachings of the Sikhi principles. So When I talk about transforming the inner world, I would try to dwell a little less on it, but I would like to talk about the outer world first. Why? Because we have seen how, despite the Khalsa character being of the basic pure and some a kind of a character which is not overt. I mean, it is not defensive. It's not only defensive. It has been created for the defense, but this is only a element of it. It is for protection. It is for protection of the weak. But what we have seen in the context of the Indian history and what has happened and what has been done to the Khalsa character, that it has been used and thrown away many a times. And that is what is happening to other, our own people, many who are of different identities, whether they are the Buddhist or whether they are the Pasmanda Muslims or whether they are from other religious backgrounds, or the so-called Hindus who are from the backward castes or backward classes. So they are the people who have been, by the dominant forces and the dominant religions, have been totally, for their context and for their benefits, have been used and thrown away. And not only that, the history itself has been modified and subverted in such a way that it has been shown that what the Sikhi and what the Khalsa has been protecting was actually protecting the divisive ideology. No, it was not true. The divisive ideology, let me be very upfront now, has always been Brahminism and the Brahminical world in the context of India, and it has become a reality now in the context of the outer world in globally also. So the Sikhi whose wellspring and the fountainhead of the Sikhi principle has been the anti-caste and anti-Brahminical notions of the ideology, it couldn't have protected the same ideology in any way. But this is how the history has been subverted and distorted and given to us, so much so that the teachings themselves have been distorted and given to us in various other forms, and that is what we are trying to protect. So coming with that background, let me tell you how during the times of Guru Gobind Ji, during the times of Arjan Dev Ji, during the times of the way Aurangzeb had been projected and how during the times, so essentially the dominant religions and the dominant thought, how they were trying to counteract. And when we come to the 19th century here in India, much later in time, how the Sikhi principles, though they were being used for the protection of the country and many more areas, how essentially when that was being done by the Khalsa with a true understanding, with a true spirit, the dominant forces did not deter, did not spare to nullify, to kind of subvert and distort the essential Sikhi and the Khalsa character. And then we see the 1984 riots, and before that many more areas in which the Sikhi principles and the Khalsa character had been facing a severe onslaught of these forces. Now let me tell you, friends, that though we see the entire thing from the Sikhi perspective, the Sikhi principles are not the only principles which have been attacked, and this is very important. The principles, whether they are from the Buddhist principles, so we talk about any egalitarian principle, any principle which enshrines importance to women, any principle which is against divisions, any principle which is for equality, any principle which empowers the poor, which empowers the lowest of the lowly, which empowers the individual freedom, with
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Webinars Made Easy.
Whether it was the saints from the down south. So each and every person and each and every of these people who had come up with this egalitarian thought of countering the spirit of inequality, which is Brahminism, they were countered. How were they countered? They were either killed, their followers were killed, or their teachings were totally distorted, or the teachings were thrown off. And that is why we see Guru Angad and Guru Arjan Dev Ji did such a phenomenal task. By that time, good many lessons were learned, and thankfully they could protect at least the teachings, and as well as the Harmandir Sahib. So, however, this particular onslaught has been, what I mean to tell you is that it is against all the other thoughts, or all the thoughts which are antagonistic to the Brahminical thought. And it is here that where today in the contemporary times our understanding has to develop. So when we try to find our comradeship, and when we try to find our associations and alliances, we have to know very well that what is the ideology that we have to counter, what are the social practices that spring out from the ideology which we have to counter, and which are the friends that we have to go along with, and which are the alliances that we have to develop, and which are the associations that we have to develop. We have to be very clear. And we have to be very clear that who are our adversaries and what is the adversary. So I am sure you all are aware that the strategy of a kind of countering this onslaught has to be understood from the perspective of what is the way of an onslaught. So many years ago, when the onslaught was physical and it was through arms and ammunition, the Khalsa came up with arms and ammunition, and it came up with training, right from horse riding training, and to training of the and we have within almost 20 years, you know, and many more, I mean hardly 50-20 years more, we have entire regions and the kingdom of the Sikhi being formed. So we have that. But today when we are facing not only the onslaught of the physical, we are facing it in form of the state onslaught. The Indian state onslaughting and attacking us in form of physical violence. Much more important than that is the onslaught of the thoughts and onslaught of the ideology which is being brought upon our minds, and that has to be recognized. And the sooner we recognize, the sooner it is important for us to recognize what is. So we cannot, when we are warriors, we cannot battle with arms and ammunition when the battle is of ideology. So ideas have to be countered with ideas. And this particular warrior, who is a warrior of the contemporary times, has to come up very stringently, very categorically, very clearly with the alliances he has formed, and his own inner world being transformed into a true warrior. He has to counter the ideas and he has to counter the physical onslaught both. And therefore, let me talk about how the spirit of inequality I'll be kind of has taken shape, what it is all about for our own understanding, and later on how this particular spirit of inequality or dominant religious ideology has, through the sacred text, been, and its transformation into the structural elements of the state apparatus in India. So it's ingrained into the judiciary, it is ingrained into the legislative, it is ingrained into the bureaucracy, it is ingrained into the religious context, it is ingrained into the daily life of the people through the media. So how this spirit of inequality, that is Brahmanism, is a living force in India. And this particular onslaught is not only faced by the Sikhi, it is faced by the Muslims, the Buddhists, and the entire backward, so-called backward classes of the Hindu community, which are themselves not Hindus. They are not Hindus at all. They have been termed as Hindus. They have been made into Hindus because Hinduism is a very recent construct. It is not a original construct. Essentially, it is Brahminical, and all the Hindu religion is a division of caste, and its identity is all caste-based. The constitutional identity is the identity which has come up, like SC, ST, OBCs, but it's a constitutional identity. But these people have still not been able to give an identity to themselves, and they are in a search for identity which will unify them all. And I'll come to it later on, how we are doing it at the organizational level, coming up with the Mool Nivasi identity or the original inhabitant identity. So from that context, we are all one. We are all one through values. We are all one through our ideas. We are all one through our thought. We are all one through a stream of consciousness. We are all one through a stream of thought which links us to the egalitarian thought, which links us with the pure God. And we are away from the thought which through which or against which all had risen in unison, but we were disconnected. So we are trying to connect now. And let me come to my next slide. From here, I'll start my presentation. So here I'm saying uprooting Brahmanism, the spirit of inequality. I'm not able to go to my next slide. Okay, there I am. So I have already defined what is Brahmanism, so defining Brahmanism and then how it is thriving and who's supporting it. These are the areas that we have to dwell upon, which are the most strongest areas and how to combat it. Essentially, this is something that we have to identify. And Brahmanism and Brahmanical is essentially the one and the same thing. And the agency, one has to understand the human agency and the ideology. So Brahmanism, it's an ideology, and the agency is the upper caste people. So many people would like to counter me and say that why do you identify the human agency as them? So I would like to quote somebody who's been very poignantly portraying himself in this arena. He says that if you consider that if capitalism has been destructive, to say that capitalism has been destructive, but capitalists have got nothing to do with capitalism is kind of something very weird. I mean, it cannot be accepted. And that is really the truth of it. And so if Brahmanism is thriving and it has been propagated, it is the privilege of it being propagated lies with the people who are deriving the maximum benefit by letting it thrive. I hope I'm clear. If there are any questions. Okay, there have been some suggestions from some speakers, genocide and massacre. Okay, so I would use the word pogrom, and a genocide, yeah. And there have been genocides being all over. So yes, the onslaughts have been in form of genocide. I come back to my presentation. So the thought and the practice. So it is the thought and the practice. It is against free, independent, individual or collective thought. Processes in all spheres, and it does not allow to think. In fact, it is against thinking, and it has retarded all human progress. It has divided the society based on birth, gradations of high and low, and it is not restricted to one generation, but all future generations sink deep in the darkness. It is non-creative, kills potential and stifles creativity, and most important, it is against wisdom and any rational thinking. So this is what isn't just the Brahmanical thought. So that's the reason why it's very important for us to oppose it to tooth and nail. Why? Because in today's structure, it has percolated the economic sphere, it has percolated the judicial sphere, it has percolated the media sphere and the legislative sphere, and it is through the state apparatus that it is acting today. So I'll just go very fast through all these slides. I will not elaborate, but how it is thriving is these are the three or more main processes through which it is thriving. And the most important of them is by creating, dividing them or the Moolnivasi Bahujan Samaj into various groups. And this is what we have to, when we are dealing with protecting the Sikhi world, we have to analyze, is this what it is going within our Sikhi world? Is this what we are doing ourselves in our Sikhi world? Is this what we are doing to our own Sikhi brothers? This is what we have to re-question ourselves. And yes, that is what the reality tells today. The Punjab reality and many more people who have written extensively shows that the caste identities, the profession identities, the language identities, and the economical identities, the cultural as well as the agricultural economical identities are creating a lot of divisions within the Sikhi world. We have to recognize that. We have to identify that and accept that. And after accepting that, we have to strategize how to overcome that. Because this is against the enunciated principles of the Guru. And if anything of that is happening, then it is our responsibility as a true Khalsa to protect these very people who are at the lowest rung and to protect and take them up with us and show them the true Sikhi character. Then the media, the primary and the elementary school syllabus. So when Sikhi Institute is actually trying to take care of this particular part, the primary school and elementary syllabus, if this is the most distorted thing in India. And that is why we don't come to know the values and the principles of the Sikhi until we grow up to be 40 years and 50 years. By that time, the whole life has gone. And if this has been totally countered in the elementary and the school syllabus in India. They have got control, enormous control over the academic and the financial resource, and they've got international support to the highest extent, and that is how they are thriving. And also because they have been able to culturalize us religiously and non-religious culturalization according to the Brahminical principles, this is how it is thriving. And of course the various festivals, least of all, our women, our children, our people, they are embroiled and totally engulfed in the festivals which enunciate the principles of inequality, which are anti-women, which are anti-Mool-Nivasi Bahujan, which are against the indigenous people of the country, which is against us. All the festivals actually propagate Brahminism in many forms. So we have to question ourselves and have to strategize in these areas which are essentially the stronghold of Brahminical world. Okay, so who's supporting this? Who's supporting Brahminism? All the upper caste in India, despite or irrespective of their religious and language identities, they are supporting Brahminism. All the upper caste NRIs are supporting Brahminism. Some of the forward castes are supporting, and most of the women from all caste groups, and all the ignorant members of the Bahujan Samaj, because of their ignorance, they are supporting Brahminism because they are living it daily in day-to-day life. And which are the most strong areas? Again, I have identified them as media, the stratification in different castes, the NRI and the international support, and the Brahminite syllabus as to be the main areas by which they are strongly upholding it. So how do we uproot modalities and strategies? We have to take the most daunting task first, bringing the amity and the unity among the caste groups. And this is where the activity of the true Khalsa has come to fore. This is where we have to come up. We also have to make direct inroads into various divisions by bypassing their so-called upper caste or leaders who have been usurping all the leadership and giving the wrong thoughts to them. And also conducting many symposiums and seminars to see that these people come together. Media. Sikhi is one of the very formidable concepts. However, we also have to see many more areas, and I'm sure globally we all are doing our level best in this arena, but we have got to do more because the task is much higher, and our efforts which we go to overcome that task, that unsurmountable task, are definitely falling short of it. And therefore, it's really important that we focus on all these areas. Yes, this is the most important area. Modalities to combat Brahminism and strategies within our own organization. Within our own Sikhi world, within our own inner self, we have to decondition ourselves. We have had too many layers of this thought and this culture on us. So deconditioning ourselves, and how can we decondition ourselves? By creating literature, by subletting our ideas to writer groups, and by regularizing our own media in form of print media as well as electronic media. So this is again coming to the role and responsibilities of the NRIs. This is have just formulated. I'm sure you all endorse this, but lobbying with the respective government is something that we have to come up with. This is what we have to look at it. Now let me tell you the very pathetic and very dismissive scenario in India. You all must be aware. So wherever we see that the governments, whether it is in the American context or in the European context, the UK people have been doing a fantastic job in this direction. Canadian government and the Denmark government has been also kind of applying the egalitarian principle and seeing that the so-called Declaration of Independence, who many people take it as the ideal, and here in the American land also, the Declaration of American Independence has been taken as a hallmark of their governing their life. But the principles of equality, that all people are born free, that the whole universe is free, this is something which has not been projected in the way it has to be. And here the pathetic and the very, very horrible scenario of India has not been projected, and here also we see the Brahminical lobby, the major Hindu lobby, totally trying to subvert the information and give it to the administration here in America. So we have to really create a very important strength at this level and trying to give the correct scenario at this particular level. So it is not only about opposing, but we have to create, reconstruct and rebuild. This is the most important slide. And all that I have talked about, actually the Gurus have created it for us. They had created for us. But what did we do? Did we preserve it? Did we protect it? So we have to recreate it, reconstruct it, rebuild it in the modern context, rebuild it at the global level, rebuild it at the national level. And it's not only about mulling over the past, talking about the onslaught, talking about the physical violence, but giving an alternative to our people. What is the alternative that the Gurus gave us? The alternative, and we all went and joined them. We joined their principles. We took it upon ourselves, and we came up as the highest warrior class in the inner realm as well as the outer realm. So, but there has been a denigrating effect within us as well. So the entire process has to be towards creation, towards reconstructing, delving deeper, extracting extricating and doing away with the weeds, with all the muck which has been layering it, and we have to rebuild it. Okay, so this has been, I just very briefly, this has actually been the focus of my talk. Now let me tell you how it has. I've been telling you that it has percolated into the sphere of the state, and it has affected. So what we see in the Brahmin world, the hierarchical world, is the picture. It totally mirrors the socio-economic reality and the religious cultural reality of India. So India as it stands today, and I've been visiting America for the past almost 8 years now. I see the same reality taking shape here in America also, and in UK also. So the religious position and the hierarchical position in the dominant religion of Brahminical is the hierarchy that the socio-economic status is seeing. And here, talking from the Sikh perspective or the Sikhi world perspective, we see that most of the people are the people who are at the receiving end. They are the people who have been at the lower rungs, and they are the people, this is, I don't have to elaborate because there have been n number of studies. The majority of the Sikh population, barring a few, maybe 5–10%, are at the receiving end at the social level, economic level, as well as the religious cultural level. So the onslaught has been tremendous. Now, taking this as the backbone, let me tell you what is happening to the entire country, where if you talk about the Hindu population, the Hindu themselves are not Hindus. They have been named as Hindus, but they are essentially the majority of the SC/ST OBCs together. And these are the ones who want to maintain their upper caste and Brahminical identity, but in the name of Hindu, they want to organize them all and use for their upper superiority. And these people are slowly getting to know this particular reality right now. So we have the entire undeveloped population of almost 90 to 100 crores out of the 120 crore, and we have hardly 10 to 15 crore people who are benefiting from the system. So this is from 102 it has gone to 120 population now, 120 crore. And this is the reality of India. And from here I would briefly go on talking about how the Brahminical idiom, how the Brahminical ideology is seen. It's not something which is only in the sacred text. It is not something which only the priests say. It is not something which only happens in the temples. But that is what is happening in education field. It is what is happening in their job field, in the employment field. It is what is happening, that is what is responsible for their poverty. That is what is responsible for the women being considered only as a sex object and nothing more. They being totally subjugated in the environment. This is because the Brahminical ideas say that. This is because the sacred texts say that. So we do not have, we cannot fall prey to that understanding and the propaganda, the false propaganda that the sacred text and the Brahminical ideology has got nothing to do with what's happening in India. No, it has got everything to do with what's happening in India. Because totally what is written in the sacred text of the Brahminical religion and what are the ideas of Brahminical religion is the reality that we see in India today. So that is what we need to tell to our people. So as we see the literacy rates, these are the dismal literacy rates. I have got some data from the Sikh perspective also, but the entire Sikh perspective has been clubbed as entire, as a one uniform. But if you stratify it according to the caste census, which has not been actually done, but there is a national sample survey and few more data which show that majority of the Sikh people are also in the SC, ST, OBC group, and they are the worst sufferers of the system. So you see the hierarchical system being reflected in the religious groups as well. In the religious groups as well. And so where are the lessons for us? These are the lessons for us. So I'm just very briefly going through my slides, which show that what is the importance that the government, which is essentially Brahminical, whichever political party it is, what they arrogate to education. So when we call them Manuvadi would be a very a diluting term. It's a diluting term. It is essentially a Brahminical. So this is what we are having in the sphere of education. Let me go back to the OBC, which forms the maximum population of our country. See, look at their representation in the central government. Look at their representation elsewhere. It's dismal. Okay, so this is essentially the same thing again. These are the various reasons by which it has been taken away. And here the economic reasons, the caste reasons dominate over all other reasons, and also the pedagogical issues or the curriculum or the syllabus, as I have already talked about. Yeah. Yeah, so this is again, when we talk about the highest judiciary, what is the representation that we have within the judiciary? Let me, for those people who have joined recently, let me tell you, my dear friends, what I am trying to show through my slide is that how the essentially ideology has been translated into a social practice, and how it is affecting the lives of the people in each and every sphere of life, field of life. Whether it is education, our whole well-being has been put into jeopardy. So we talk about economic reforms and economic, but how has it affected our people? So this is what is the recent study which shows the social perspective of India's higher education. And this gentleman totally talks about how the trends have been totally against the majority of the people in the country, irrespective of their religious background. And people who are essentially profit-oriented have been given the responsibility of imparting education on as a profiteering consumerist, a professional thing. So you can imagine what must be the fate of our people over there. And then same thing is seen in the realm of health. This is what our people are suffering from. And whether this is a study which has been taken from Punjab, Haryana and northern regions, and you can see that. So what I'm trying to focus is that irrespective of the religious identity, the Sikhi principles are being tampered with. The Sikhi elements which were in Punjab, which were in Haryana, the socio-economic. So when Bhindranwale and when we talked about many more people from the Khalsa medium, the religious idiom we used, we were talking about the socio-economic principles, the socio-economic subjugation of our people. It was a religious idiom, but the problems were essentially social and economic. They essentially had to do with the tampering of the Sikhi principle. That is what, even if we talk about the same thing from the Buddhistic principle, Buddhism, if at all it was anything, it was a socio-economic egalitarian religion or an economic liberation. And when we talk about Brahmanism, it is nothing but a code of ethics, a law, which has been given the name of the Dharma, but it is all about power game. And the power game is through economics. The power game is through politics. And the power game is through making us slaves, physical slaves and mental slaves. And slavery has been we have been enslaved through making us weak physically as well as making us weak mentally. So this is our physical weakness through the economic realm. And this is what we see as we see that how our people are becoming physically weak. The gender discrimination we see, and we also see by caste. So the same hierarchical system of the Brahmins has been reflected into the physical structure of the people. So can you see the beauty of it? Can you see how it has been ingeniously ingrained and programmed so that without our people realizing them. So if you are a power caste in the Brahminical realm, physically and nutritionally also you are better off. And if you are at the lower level in the Brahminical realm, this will reflect in each and every sphere, which depends upon whether you are a daughter or you are a son, or whether you are a SC, or whether you are urban or rural. So you can see, my dear friends, how the programming has been totally working, and it has been made so actively working in each and every sphere. And it is the same thing. So gender discrimination, which is given the highest principle in the Brahminical religion, and this is what we see being reflected. So in the Sikhi world, if we are adhering to the gender discrimination in some form or the other, that is the reason we see female feticide so being actively taken up, or being the social construct in the Punjabi world or the northern India. As long as we keep on adhering to those principles and keeping away the Sikhi principles of egalitarianism between gender, we will keep having this thing reflected in our society again and again. Okay, so let me again go very briefly through all this. So what are the consequences? So the consequences are these. Okay, I'm again going very fast on this realm. And my dear friends, today let me make you understand that education and health, the way they are countering education and health on one side and countering the religious thought on the other side, these three areas have been the major ways in which the Sikhi thoughts and the egalitarian thoughts have been countered. Okay. So this is the economic growth which has been propagated, and the national income has been, and we have been told that the economic GDP has gone to 9 to 9.5%. I've written a paper. I would like to share that paper with you, maybe if I can get it through the CICRI. And I have delved heavily on this particular aspect, that how under the gloss of economic growth lies the pain and horror that India is today, and all the separatism, the antagonism, the caste conflicts, the communal conflicts, the educational deprivation, the economic deprivation, the health deprivation, the starvation, and the malnutrition. how this particular economic growth has resulted in that, and how the very concept of Begumpura, the very concept of Harmandir Sahib, the very concept of a Khalsa kingdom has been tampered in India. So this is the reality. We see all the committees and all the people showing this reality. Okay, so let me I'm not very sure whether my time is up, probably. And this is how the private sector has resulted in increasing the poverty in India. And my dear friends, it is our own people who have been suffering the maximum out of this. So these are the questions that we are asking. Okay, so what does that say? For all these, I mean, this is really a very fantastic slide. I've just taken a gist of it. And let me tell you that for this particular presentation, I must have covered almost like 40-50 references, giving you all the data. And as the gurus had come up with a principle, the modern scholarship has come up with an understanding. And what does this understanding say? It says that underlying all this, the world that we see today is that it focuses that casteism, or the casteism, thereby meaning the Brahminical religion or the Brahminical world, because Brahminical and Hindu religion is nothing else but caste. And caste ingrained, enshrined, it being spiritualized, caste being sanctified, and caste, if you are transgressing caste, it being penalized. So this is the stronghold, the foothold of Brahminical world. And what has the scholarship got to say? It says that that casteism or the Brahminical religion, the deep ideological issue that undercuts even the most genuine reform measures, and suggests that the research and policy options that may help to address have to address the structural and ideological issues. And that is where we see that this is the conclusion that we have to come to. And these are the ideology. It's an ideological fight. It's an ideological into social practice, which has transformed into an ideological and a social practice fight. Okay, I'm getting some comments, and yes. Yes, yeah, that's true. Okay, so this is the last presentation. This is my last slide, and I would like to sum up the whole thing once again. Yes, I like to sum up the whole thing. The first and foremost, the Sikh cosmos is a liberative cosmos. It is a cosmos. ये जो world है पूरा हमारा, ये और हमारे गुरुओं ने जो हमें दिया है, the gurus have given us, and they have paid a heavy price of their lives. They have taken tremendous efforts over centuries in making it into a text, and it's a document. It's not something which is imaginative. It is documented after all the scholarship of many centuries had been made available to them. तो इतना सारा होने के बाद में एक सिख कॉस्मोस क्रिएट हुआ है. There have been many sacrifices which the Sikh and the Khalsa and many more people from who are having the same egalitarian thought, they have paid a heavy price, whether they were saints, whether they were from the Buddhist idiom, or whether they were from the Charvak idiom or the materialistic groups, and many more people who have liberated themselves in their own spheres down south. ये सब एक ही वर्ल्ड है. और अभी ये जो हमारा आइडियाज और आइडियोलॉजी जो है, इसका जो डिग्रेडेशन हुआ है डाउन द सेंचुरी एंड नाउ इन द करेक्ट कॉन्टेक्स्ट, इसके लिए देयर हैज बीन अ कंसेंट्रियस एफर्ट्स लिए गए हैं. देयर हैव बीन डेलिबरेट अटेम्प्ट्स. क्योंकि ये सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट के खिलाफ है. because it is against the interest of the dominant group. It is against the interest of a Brahminical ideology. And this is what they don't want. So all the forces all over the world who are non-egalitarian would not want the Sikhi cosmos to flourish. And the main counter which comes to us is not in form of Maulanawad today. It does not come in form of Muslim fundamentalism. It comes to us in the form of the rightist Hindu fundamentalism which we have to counter. And this fundamentalism is not a lunatic fringe. It is not something which is deviant. It is ingrained and enshrined in the essential principles of the Hindu Brahminical religion. और जब हम लोग हमारे self के freedom की, when we talk about the freedom of the self, then we are talking about when we want to connect to the ultimate God and ultimate reality, we have to transform हमारा जो essential thinking है हमारे self के बारे में, कि हमारा connection God के साथ कैसा होना चाहिए, वो होना चाहिए हमारी प्यूरिटी को लेकर. तो हमारी प्यूरिटी आएगी जब हमारे समाज की प्यूरिटी आएगी. एंड हमारी जो लड़ाई, जब that fight would be pure and the most highest quality when we liberate our brothers out of this mayhem, out of this subjugation, out of this slavery. That is the real fight. And that is the fight that our gurus had fought. हमें बताया गया that कि somebody's religion or the Brahminical people were countered by the Muslim, and therefore the gurus have went and protected them. In a way it could be true, but what is more important is that they were supporting the individual liberatory movement or the individual freedom of a person to profess what he wants. And what is सबके हित के लिए, what is necessary for Bahujan Hitaay and Bahujan Sukhaay, means for the benefit of the many and benefit of all, is a thought which enshrines equality and individual freedom, and that all men are born free and all men are born pure, so and all men and women are equal. तो यह जो है, ये जब तक हम लोग लड़ाई, हमें अपनी लड़ाई नहीं लगती है, unless and until we consider this as our battle, as our fight. And it's not a fight of arms and ammunition, not at all. It has to be done in the constitutional principles. It has to be done in a peaceful way. And it is the fight of the ideas, in an ideological, in an intellectual way. And by education and by agitation, by peaceful means. It is not something which we have to rise in aggression to, but that is what the pure Sikhi principles are. So with this, my dear friends, I guess I have kind of elaborated quite a lot, and I guess I would like to give it off to the organizers to kind of take it over from me and see to it that you are able to give your questions to me so that I can answer you. So if Gurudev or Harpreet is hearing me, they would tell me how to,
Yeah, Manisha, if you can pass over the organizer rights back to Sikh Research.
How do I do that?
You just right click on Sikh Research Institute and say make presenter.
Talking Sikh Research. Where is that Sikh Research?
It'll be under the staff and then Sikh Research Institution, right click, make presenter.
Staff, okay. Staff, here we are. Where is it?
In the attendees, can you see the attendees? Then there's the staff tab.
Attendees.
Yeah. And then you right click
13,
on
13 out of 1.
Right. So you
101, and then I have the audio thing coming. I don't see the staff coming in.
Are you looking at the attendees? And then there's the staff tab. Staff tab.
I'm sorry about that, but
Okay, let me make. I think I can do that. I think I can switch over.
Attendees, I see it now. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now
Okay.
it's back. I to
right click on the Sikh Research Institute.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
I'll just have some closing comments, and then I can hand it back to you to answer any questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd like to thank
So I said,
all
they will be
the,
questioning him. They will be questioning me through the typing it, or they will be able to ask me
yeah, they'll be able
on
to
audio.
type it. You can see
Okay.
through the questions panel.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay, let me just put some closing comments first.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your questions and comments, and my apologies to those whose questions might not be addressed fully at this due to time constraints. And please be reminded that these webinars are provided for free, but there is a cost associated with its technology and administration. If you feel you have benefited from this particular webinar or others in the past, please consider becoming a webinar sponsor. And more details can be obtained at info@sikri.org. And now, if Dr. Banger can see some of the questions, and she can feel free to answer them. Dr. Manisha, can you see any of the questions there that you need to
Yeah, I mean,
address?
I've been seeing comments. I saw some comments that were done during my presentation. I can, yes, the Brahmin setting is about the issue of class. Yes,
And I
yes.
think,
I mean, essentially, there was a suggestion from Mr. Amrik Bamra that to use the word massacre or genocide, and I kind of pointed out to that yes, these genocides have been done many a times in the history, and yes, they are being continued today also. And it is all about segregating. It is about segregating, isolating, and then countering. That is what is their strategy. So if that is their strategy, if segregating is their strategy, then we have to non-segregate ourselves. And how we have to non-segregate? We have to non-segregate ourselves by forming a wider base and a wider support all over the world. Wider an ideological connection. Ideological and value-based connections is that what we have to form. And the more we are able to do that with all the ideological based friends, then it will be difficult for them to counter and get into the genocide and massacres that they are. They are doing that to Muslims also. Essentially today's Muslim groups are the worst sufferers of Maulanawad today. So Maulanawad is not affecting the Hindus so much as it is affecting the Muslims themselves. And these are the upper caste Brahminical people who had converted them at various points in time into Muslim religion, Islam. They are followers of Islam today. Islam doesn't profess inequality, but that is what we have seen the Brahminical echoes have reflected in each and every sphere, and it is affecting the South Asian community in totality, not only the communities within India. So we have to forge alliances with everybody. And और एक बहुत मजे की बात है कि these groups in many parts in India are being made to fight against each other. So some areas the Christians are made to fight with Buddhists, the Buddhists are made to fight with Sikhs, the Sikhs are made to fight with Muslims, and the Muslims are made to fight with the Buddhists, that way. And the Hindus are made to fight with Muslims, but in all the fights, it is the people who are from the SC, ST, OBC community or the so-called backward class who form the essential minority group, minorities of India. They are the sufferers. They get killed. They get killed brutally in the genocides. They get massacred, and they are the worst sufferers. So in each and every realm, whether it is the Sikhi realm or the Maulanawad or the Christianity, they are the people who are using the religious idiom to suppress their own people. So our fight is dual. It is within our own selves as well as outside.
yes, Dr. G, even there was an interesting comment from Navroop Kaur.
Yeah.
The one that where she says that where you are analyzing the sheer forces of how they are attacking us under the face of that revenge, and and to
Yeah.
protect the ideology that not only opposes those forces but rather reconstructs and rebuilds on
Yes,
the
yes.
principles Guru
Yes,
spreads.
and actually, I mean, today the younger generation has to do. It's a very formidable task, and um, it's such a pure work that the gurus have done for us. They have taken head on. They have taken they have given a frontal attack, and this the adversaries know. This the adversaries, the highest kind of threat which Brahminism today gets is from the Sikh religion, the Sikhi thought. They do not get the threat from the Islam thought because it's a foreign thought for them, and it has been totally countered at the global level by labeling them into various idioms. The Buddhist thought, though it is egalitarian in many ways, it is it goes into the root of it, and it has countered it to a very large extent. Buddha was totally frontal in his attack, and Buddhist elements have found its presence in this Guru Granth Sahib in many ways, whether it was through Guru Nanak or whether it was through Guru Ravidas ji, or whether it was through Mirabai, or whether it was through Kabir. Buddha found place in Guru Granth Sahib. So those people, they were very aware of what their adversaries, who were their adversaries, which thoughts were their adversaries. But they had their own limitations in their own social context. However, they tried and they did their best to overcome those constraints. And that is why what I mean to say is institutionalization of a thought is very important. Institutionalization of ideas is important. Whereas we may have heard that you may kill a person but you cannot kill an idea. But Dr. Ambedkar says that you can kill a person and you can kill an idea also if you do not propagate it. Just like a plant needs watering, so does an idea needs continuous propagation. And this is where we have lacked. Because we have been propagating within our world, Sikhi world, within our religiously identical world. We have not done anything to go and take the Sikh principles to the other people, show them the light of this world. We have not done that enough. And this is where we have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see any other interesting? There have been some interesting comments. But I think what you're saying is that I think if we adhere on to the beloved principles that Sikhi wants us to adhere to, this is another fight we can win, because
Yes.
it is the good guns that Akal Purkh Vaheguru wants in us
Yes.
to fight the injustice that is going on everywhere.
Yes.
And this
Yes.
injustice has been going on, is still going to go on for a while.
Yes. And for this injustice, it is not an injustice which is ephemeral or non-real or only hypothetical. It is a real injustice, and there is a human agency to this injustice. And so we have to embodify our principles into our own human agency, and we have to, our human agency has to take a form of a warrior, a true warrior, and we have to identify the human agency on the other side. And we have to counter those ideas as well as human agencies. That is what I mean.
Okay. I think Dr. Manisha ji, if you could probably you could let some people have an email address, or maybe they can contact sikri.org if they have some other questions that they probably need more clarification on. Because sometimes these sessions do take, we've already gone into 1.5 hours, and maybe they can, through the channel of Sikri, be able to contact you and get some answers that they do need. And it has been very interesting. I would like to remind all the attendees that a link to this recording will be sent to everybody, and hopefully you should be able to see most of the slides while you're going through the recording. And if there are any questions, feel free to direct
Are
them
there
to.
any questions from Harpreet's side? Harpreet has been essentially
Yeah, I noticed
maybe
that he had been typing some questions for
yeah.
you, and more or less you've gone through most of them.
Yes, yes, yes. And there is the in a comment, yeah, Harpreet's comment is there that yeah, Sikhs have known this all along. Unfortunately, some of us Sikhs are siding with the oppressors. Yeah, this is a reality, and yeah, we have to do that transformations within our own world. मतलब कहने का मतलब है कि ये forces को हमको अंदर से भी tackle करना पड़ेगा. Yeah.
Okay, with this, can we quickly wind up the presentation, Dr. Ji?
Yeah, so I would say thanks a lot, and I feel that in the coming years, globally, the Sikhi principles and the younger generation of the Sikhi world, and we all, as friends and as comrades, will be able to identify ourselves truly with these principles and take it to the entire world globally and enlighten our people, enlighten them, as well as strategize and formulate a very working kind of a pattern and institutionalize them in the most recent way and contemporary way, so that our future generations should not feel the gap as we are feeling for ourselves. So our generation has a tremendous responsibility, and we will see to it that our responsibilities are met with, that we fulfill our responsibilities, which our future generations, when they look back, we give them a legacy. We will be able to give them a very good legacy which has been handed over to us and which we have been able to receive. We have been very fortunate. We have been so fortunate that the Gurus have given the purest of the pure to us. And it is our responsibility to protect it, to preserve it, and to hand over in a much better form, in an active form, in an institutionalized form to our generation, so that they can carry on this particular pure thought as well as pure work in their lives, and liberate themselves and keep themselves liberated and keep themselves away from getting enslaved again and again and again. Thank you so much. Guru Fateh, Vaheguru Guru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Fateh.
Okay, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you.